A decision by Nersa to grant the Eskom electricity tariff increase has been widely criticized. Starting from April, the electricity tariff will increase by 18.65%. Joining us now to get their reaction is SACP spokesperson Dr. Alex Mashilo. Dr. Mashilo, thank you very much for your time. We saw that statement that you issued yesterday. You are vehemently opposed to the tariff increase, but perhaps that's spilled milk now because a decision has been taken. Who do ordinary South Africans go to complain about a service they are paying where there's now been an increase and yet it's intermittent?
Yes, you're right, Tony. This is spilled milk. However, our statement was issued ahead of the decision made and announced. And we did that deliberately so that the message reach the decision makers. You will recall that at the time when we released the statement, the application by Eskom was that of 32%. So we wanted to act ahead of the decision made and make sure that our message still stands, whatever decision would be made, because we want access to electricity in South Africa to be affordable and, if possible, to include free electricity for the poorest of the poor who cannot afford to pay. There was a transition starting in 1998 December in South Africa when the cabinet adopted the white paper on energy, in terms of which, instead of ramping up investment in public power generation capacity and supporting Eskom to move with the times, the cabinet decided to prioritize opening up the power generation space to private power producers, the so-called independent power producers. When you read that white paper, you will be very angry. There is a line or paragraph in that white paper that says governments across the world are not building self-sufficiency in electricity generation. Instead, they are liberalizing electricity generation as a sector to bring in independent power producers. Hang on a little bit. Just imagine a government led by a liberation movement not acting to build self-sufficiency in power generation capacity, while at the same time massively rolling out electrification to include the formerly oppressed, who were excluded for 100 years since the first household electricity connection in Cape Town in 1894. I mean, from 1894 to 1994, the overwhelming majority of the oppressed, being black in general and Africans in particular, were excluded. A very, very, very impressive program started after 1994 to include them. I mean, you don't need to study engineering like I have studied engineering myself to understand that when you expand electrification at the same time, you must build new power generation capacity to keep pace with the time. And when you read that white paper, you will also be angry because Eskom did warn that by around 2007, electricity demand will surpass electricity supply. It was so urgent that we put in place a new power build program. But the white paper instead concluded that measures were going to be important to be put in place, not immediately, but in the medium term.
All right.
When the Midupi and the Gusile program were put in place, it was too little, too late, and the two power stations were badly designed. They suffered from poor work, they missed deadlines. Until today, they have not met deadlines. And the transition also included rising electricity tariffs. South Africa at the moment is a shame, considering that the beneficiaries of colonial oppression and apartheid enjoyed cheap access to electricity, while the beneficiaries of our democratic dispensation are now facing rising costs of electricity, and this is building in the general rising cost of living, which is highly problematic.
Dr. Mashilo, you've said a mouthful, but, you know, as a journalist, I listen with I listen with a critical ear. I cannot believe that with the announcement that we have just had delivered yesterday, you are still talking about the possibility of free electricity. Some people are going to say, actually, it does appear that the SACP indeed does live in a parallel universe. Where would anyone get free electricity when electricity costs are where they are? Why would you even suggest that to begin with?
No, we suggest that, Tony. It has to be a program. You must be a visionary. You must be a visionary. And by the way, this situation must not last forever. We need massive investment in new power generation capacity. And you must appreciate that the poorest of the poor are now battling with the rising cost of electricity and the general rising cost of living. It is not to live in a parallel universe, to put in place ideas that this must be overcome.
But
this
Dr. Mashilo,
Dr.
Mashilo, please, sir, you are part of what is called the governing alliance. It's the SACP, the ANC leading it, COSATU, including Sanko, who, by the way, well, I will say that we did try to get a hold of them. Hopefully we will at some point. You have been part of this governing alliance, and when the warnings were issued by Eskom to say we need to expand, and those that were in government at the time simply ignored the whole entire warning, it is the reason we are where we are today. So, take responsibility and perhaps say, we perhaps are not ready to govern as we thought we were.
No, we are taking responsibility, and this is the responsibility that we are taking. The alliance comprises independent formations. We do not agree on everything. We disagreed on this question, and the line that unfolded was a line we disagreed with. We were critical and opposed it, and we remain opposed to it. Just as when the economic policy we disagreed with, under which this direction was taken, here, you noted, we went out mobilizing, filling stadiums, marching on the streets together with COSATU. So the fact that we are in the tripartite alliance does not mean that we agree on everything.
But you lose every day.
There are areas where we disagree. There are areas where we disagree, like on this question, and we make it very clear that we disagree. And over and above that, we went out to mobilize, and we are still doing so. And we believe that by deepening the mobilization, expressing our disagreement, we will be joined by more South Africans. And as more South Africans join, we will be able to change the direction.
Maybe we should stop talking politics, Dr. Mashilo, for a second, because that's the battle that you, COSATU, have simply not won in the ANC. So you are losers at this. Perhaps we should stop talking about politics and talk about solutions. There is a suggestion from a CEO of Standard Bank, Sim Chabalala, who says if a CEO is to come from outside of South Africa, so be it, as long as that person will have the stomach for the politics of the day in this country. Do you agree with that view?
No, you said we must stop politics, but your conclusions will reflect the stomach of the politics of the day in the country. So I don't know whether I must answer that question.
Well, you should answer the question.
You need to answer that question.
Answer the question, perhaps leave the latter part. It's got to do with whether or not you think an Eskom CEO, the next CEO of Eskom, is perhaps, we've got to look outside of the country in order to solve the mess we are in today.
Policy is determined through politics. I'm sure you know that.
Indeed.
If we are weak politically, there is no way we can influence policy direction. You have just said it that COSATU and the SACP were losing on this question. By the way, it is not just COSATU and the SACP. It is also yourselves and all other South Africans. who have not been able to push forward to achieve the correct direction. You, together with us, are part of the losers and the people who are suffering from this direction. We need maximum support from the rest of South Africa so that we can, through political power, be able to bring forward a correct political direction. I don't think that South Africa, as it stands right today, does not have the skills capacity to produce a CEO who can lead ESCOM. I really dismiss that idea, right? Sim Chabalala is a CEO in a Standard Bank of South Africa, as you have said. He is a South African. I don't think that we can say South Africa does not have a skill, does not have knowledge, does not have capacity to produce a CEO who can lead ESCOM. We have over 21 universities and colleges in this country. We are producing master's degrees, we are producing PhDs, we are producing skills. What we need to do is to ensure correct selection in terms of the CEO and to appreciate that a company is not run only by a CEO. There are CFOs and there are other senior managers, and the rest of the workers must do their jobs in a correct environment.
Do you think that whoever that person might be will be ready for things such as poisoning whilst they are on the job?
Tony, we have suffered a lot, man. Look at us, man. We have had people, and if I may make mention of myself, Mapaila and others, we have had people come to our home with rifles. Okay, we have suffered a lot. Here you must know that you stand up to serve the nation. You must be ready to face anything that comes your way. When we saw the barrel of the gun in our house with our children, we never withdrew. That's why we are still talking to you today, because we are prepared to serve the nation, all right?
Dr.
We
Mashilo.
need that capacity.
Dr. Alex Mashilo, SACP spokesperson, thank you very much for your time, sir. When we